to Database Talk channel. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to assign CPU resources to pods. So as you may know, pod is an unit of execution in Kubernetes ecosystem. So the resources that we assign basically to the pod, for example, CPU, memory, and storage, you can assign to pod. So in this example, I'm going to demonstrate how to assign CPU resources to pod. So here I'm going to use a minikube, and I also enable the minikube as explained in this documentation. This is a Kubernetes documentation which explains actually how to do this. So I'm going to demonstrate the same example using minikube so that we can get some idea about how this is happening. Let's go to the demo directory. Okay, I'm in minikube now. Let's create a namespace called CPU example. Yes, namespace is created. Let's see with the namespace that we just created. Here you can see CPU example namespace has been created. And there's a file here called CPU request limit YAML file. And this one actually creates a pod with the limit of one CPU and also the request of half CPU, which is basically 500 milli CPUs. So let's create a pod by using this request YAML file in the same namespace. Yeah, that has been created. So let's see the pod in the namespace now. Yep, it is created and it's running. So let's get the output of in YAML format to see what is the configuration in this pod. And here you can see it has one CPU limit, which is the maximum limit you can go. And the request is 500 milli CPUs. That's how in Kubernetes you mention CPU resources. So we'll see the CPU usage by using kubectl top command for this pod, how much it utilizing. Let's give it a few seconds and see whether we get the results. Yep, you can see the results now. So basically it says 998 milli CPUs right now it is using. As you can remember, according to the YAML file, we set a limit as one CPU. One CPU is basically equal to 1000 milli CPUs. So Kubernetes will not allow to exceed that limit because we already set that limit for the pod in the manifest file when we are creating it. So always the CPU utilization is below that limit. So you can see here right now it is under 1000 milli CPU level. So which is how you basically allocate CPU resources to pod. So let's delete this pod. That we just created. And we will create another pod by using this YAML, the YAML file that I'm going to show you right now, the CPU request to YAML file. So what is this going to, we are going to specify here the limit is some unrealistic number. For example, in my machine right now I'm demoing, it has 6 CPUs, CPU core allocated to that mini cube. But I'm going to limit this pod as 100 CPUs. So obviously I don't have 100 CPUs in this machine, which is unrealistic number. Let's see how the pod or Kubernetes is going to react to this limit. And also I'm requesting 100 CPU. Both 100 limit is the 100 CPU as well as the request is also the 100 CPU. So the pod name is CPU demo.2. That's a request. And arc section basically says try to start with at least two CPUs. So I'm going to save this file and let's create a pod by using this YAML file. In the same namespace. Yeah, it's created now. Let's see the created pod now. Yeah, you can see pod is pending and it's not running. Let's give it few seconds and see whether it is coming to running state or not. Yep, no, still it is pending. So now it's time to look at the events of the pod by outputting into YAML format the pod configuration. So we can see basically the real reason why it is pending. Right, so on the events you can see there's a warning. At that warning it says nodes are available but insufficient CPU, it says insufficient CPU. That is basically which is right, because we have specified 100 CPUs and the Kubernetes cannot provision 100 CPUs in this machine because it simply doesn't have 100 CPUs, so it is not starting the pod. So that is how you allocate the CPU resources. Same as that, you can allocate memory also and storage as well. So let's delete the CPU example namespace to clean up the demo that we did. Yeah, that's basically it. That is what I wanted to show you. So thank you for watching.